TelecomTV, where ICT connects.
Hi, this is TelecomTV. I'm Martyn Warwick. We're in the United States, in Silicon Valley, at an event called the 4th ETSI IG on NFV meeting, and it's a mouthful. ISG stands for Industry Standardization Group, and NFV, of course, stands for Network Functions Virtualization. And I'm talking with Ken Fricklas from Cablelabs. Ken, first off, we're here in the backstage, behind the scenes at the show, and there's a lot of noise going on around us, so bear with us, and we'll get through it as best we can, given this applause and people speaking everywhere around. But on we go. I didn't know until you spoke to me just now what Cablelabs is. I thought you were a sort of commercial company, and you're nothing like that. You're something much bigger. Tell us about it.
Well, Cablelabs is the research arm of the cable industry. We were created in 1984 by a consortium of cable companies that's grown up to be 49 cable companies worldwide. And what we actually do is we create the standards that the cable industry uses, places where specifications and standards are need to be shared among cable companies so that they can have a common the vendor community where vendors can create things that all the cable companies can use. We also do the certification of those standards, and in my opinion, the most interesting thing that we do is we examine technologies which are coming up, and we're the futurist organization to try to tell cable companies this is how you can stay competitive, this is what's going to be happening in the future.
So why would NFV and SDN ever be used by the cable industry?
You got to realize that a cable company is literally the same thing as a telco until you get to the very last point. So we use different technology to go from that cable, which is at your house, to where that cable terminates. But everything upstream is IP. And it's all the same problems. You still have to set up everything the same way. You've still got to have a large backbone moving data around. And actually, the cable companies have become the largest deliverer of internet service to people, at least in the United States. So when you think about the difference between a telco and a cable company, the only difference is that the direction cable came at it from was, hey, we're delivering television, and later they started delivering internet. Now, as far as we're concerned, it's all the same thing. We're delivering your internet, we're delivering your cable, we may be delivering your phone service. Same problems, larger scale.
Given that, what will the impact on the industry be?
Well, there's two places where it affects them. So first of all, just thinking about a cable company as a large telco, operating the same way as any other broadband provider. You've got a huge internal network, right? So you've got all sorts of machines, all sorts of platforms that you're running internally. It's going to affect the way that you can use these things, affect ways that you handle the capacity within the network, affect the ways that you do your actual operation systems, as well as hook things into your billing systems and everything else. You've got new people turning on service all the time. You want to be able to change your classification of service, anything that you want to be able to do to modify your network, from scalability, flexibility, moving things around, congestion management. Those are all NFV operations.
You talked about the last mile just then. Look, traditionally, the last mile is always the hardest part of the network as far as incomers are concerned. It's technologically difficult to get into it. It's secure and it's guarded and held very close by those network owners who have cable networks. And it's also very expensive to get into on the other hand as well. You pay a lot to gain access. So what's going to happen? How are you going to get other people in to provide services and applications over that when things are so hard at the moment?
Well, that's already happened to some extent, because up until this point, it's all been about delivering that video. And yeah, very much it was the case that they owned that and they were delivering the video, but people are very rapidly sort of moving away from what we call the linear model of delivering video. And all of this stuff, which are over-the-top services, are getting more and more important. And that's really where the NFV and SDN piece comes in. It's a question of what are we delivering over your IP connection? So the fact that that last bit of cable is actually a cable, and you've got slightly different equipment there, that all sort of sits below the NFV level. Okay, that's last mile. That's actual the management of the service flows. In the formal model, that's the SDN piece. And that's going to have to be a little bit different than what you've got in the TCP/IP world, because it's different equipment, which is not a big deal. The NFV, everything that you're trying to do with it above that, that's all exactly the same. So going back to your other question, which is, well, how are you going to be able to leverage that?
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is that's actually something which has been coming down in price pretty rapidly. I mean, if you tried to buy a 15 megabit internet connection in your house in the year 2000, it would have been very, very expensive, on the order of $2,000 a month. Okay, now you can get that from any one of a number of cable providers for probably $30 a month. So we think that trend has slowed down a little bit, but it hasn't stopped. So you've got this issue of, well, where are you going to make your money if you're not making your money off of video? You're making your money off your TCP/IP. And one of the ways you're going to have to do this is providing additional services. The problem is you've got this huge monolithic network, right? You know, cable companies are very large organizations in general. Even the smaller ones have a very heterogeneous network. Everything kind of looks the same. You're trying to provide a new class of services. So these guys need to learn how to innovate in that marketplace. And the way you can do that is by opening it up. So this actually provides them with the ability to both decrease their own operational expense by using SDN and NFV techniques to lower your operational expense. But anything that you can now use yourself internally, you can probably come up with a business model to expose that and create a infrastructure where you can actually have innovative services. Things where you don't have to spend millions of dollars just to activate a new service to find out whether or not it's something people are interested in. So the big problem we've had, it's been very difficult to be agile in the cable industry. This should enable us to actually become agile.
A final question then, what about the adoption curve? Where are we in reality?
Well, to be honest, unless you are literally a data center provider, I don't think it's really being adopted by anybody yet. I think it's a little bit.
Cases, is that?
No, I got you. It's a little young. So what we're seeing is that certain of the cable providers who we work with are definitely doing pilot projects already. And some of them, and I don't have to name names because if you're following them at all, it should be fairly obvious. They're already going fairly far down at least the SDN path. The NFV path is a little bit more fuzzy at this point. We're just seeing the first release of Open Daylight in December. What we're doing as an organization is we're actually following OnLab and Open Daylight, and we're looking around for other projects, for places to make sure that if this is going to be handy to the cable industry, we want to make sure that the cable industry both knows about them and has been part of the process so they're actually useful to the cable industry so they don't wind up at a competitive disadvantage. Now, going back to the question you actually asked me, which is how fast is it going to happen? Well, my expectation is we're literally going to see some news about small-scale implementations in the next 6 months. I think that's going to happen pretty quickly. Before it has a significant impact, before it enables those ecosystems I was talking about before, I expect that to be in probably the 3 to 8 year time frame. So it's going to take a little while before this stuff especially starts to affect capital expense. In the short term, I think it can have a pretty big effect on operations, definitely within 5 years. I think we're going to see a huge impact on operational costs.
Ken Fricklas, thanks.
Thank you.
TelecomTV, where ICT connects.